morning. Welcome to Shattering Myths, a program devoted to those of you who are open to the realization or have come to recognize that all of the world's religions, and that would be all of them, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, socialist, secular humanism, that all of them are corrupt, that they're rotten to the core, that they're counterproductive, as is all of the world's political, economic, and military institutions. I am Yahowah. Our number, if you'd like to join us and have a discussion about the truth, 877-300-7645. This is something that we used to do, Scott. I know you're having wonderful success with the view from the couch. You've now have the show syndicated on at least two stations. New York Jets receiver Brandon Marshall said yesterday that many players in the NFL believe that race played a role in Patriots quarterback Tom Brady's 4-game suspension being lifted. How could you be that jaundiced? How could you be? I mean, that is just absolutely living in a mythical world.
I hadn't heard that, but the first thought that comes to mind is anything can be made into a racial issue if that's what you're trying to do. If that's what your agenda is to try and turn anything into racial.
Well, all you're dealing with is unfounded opinions at that point. But if that's your thing,
if that's what you want to run on, you go ahead and do that.
Right.
That is the dumbest. That is the dumbest thought that I've ever heard.
Well, it may not be the dumbest because they've said some pretty dumb things, but the realization is that the courts found that the 4-game suspension was unjustified. So the NFL, based upon the condition that he was listing, which is the lifting of the suspension, the courts found that the NFL suspended him. In other words, they were too harsh on him. And so it's a proof that there is reverse racism in the NFL, not racism. So this boy, Brandon Marshall's a big mouth anyway. Brandon Marshall really ought to stick with whatever fleeting football skills he has left and shut up. I mean, it's just moronic. The opposite is what's shown by the lifting of the suspension.
Yeah, well, obviously he didn't pay attention at all to the case or anything the judge said. He just saw Tom Brady's a white quarterback and said, well, of course his suspension got lifted. He's a white guy.
Yeah, but what the court said is the suspension by the NFL was too harsh. And so the NFL overpenalized him, according to the courts. So it proves exactly the opposite, that the NFL is into reverse discrimination. Just amazing. Now, the second stupid comment of the day was from Austin, Texas. You know that Charlie Strong, who has been an absolute unmitigated failure at Texas, that Charlie Strong is the third highest paid college football coach in the country?
Yeah.
You probably know that Nick Saban, who I'm not a fan of Nick Saban, but Nick Saban's the highest paid coach in the NCAA. But you know what he's got Alabama in the top 3 teams and winning national championships year in and year out. Okay. I get it. And he makes about $7 million a year. And the second highest is a guy that has won, I think, 3 national championships, 2 at Florida and the other at Ohio State. And he gets paid about $6 million a year. But Charlie Strong at 5? He's the third highest. Can you imagine? The problem that Texas has now, they've got a guy that they brought in that they can't fire. He's African American. I mean, this is again a problem of racism, but reverse racism.
To be fair, everything that Charlie Strong has been one of my favorite coaches the last few years because any kid that's gotten in trouble, he's dealt with very quickly. He's kicked starters off of his team because they are not
I like it.
They're not the quality of person that he wanted.
Yep, I like it. That's good stuff.
Yep.
But you're talking about the University of Texas, a perennial top 10 team that every 10 years or so competes very strongly for a national championship, and under his dominion, they have been god-awful.
This is his second year, right?
Either second or third.
Yeah, well, towards the end of Mac Brown's career, the Longhorns were pretty horrible, and he came into a fairly horrible. It's either second or third year.
Yeah, I think it's third.
And then the first year that he was there, he
got a pass. They did some cleaning house. Yeah, he got a pass, and he won some enthusiastic support because of the way he dealt with bad behavior. The second year, then it's on him.
Stupid? Did he say something stupid?
No, this is what he did. Charlie Strong is shaking up his coaching staff after Texas 38-3 loss against Notre Dame. Strong demoted co-offensive coordinator Sean Watson and Joe Wickline on Tuesday and named receivers coach Jay Norwell as his new play caller. We have to get this program on track, Strong said. We have to do a better job of coaching. There's no reason for us to go out and perform at the level we've been performing. There's no reason at all. You know, the problem, Charlie, is that you're a nice guy. The problem, Charlie, isn't that the assistant coaches, you chose them. You managed them. It's just that you're not very good at the job, Charlie. You know, if the job was to take young boys and have them be accountable, and that's a noble ambition. You should work for the Y or Big Brothers, or should be the dean of student affairs. He's the head football coach at Texas. You don't blame other people. You don't demote other people. You take it on the chin.
This is his second year, by the way. I just looked it up. This is his second year. As somebody that's dealt with watched the Gophers program under Tim Brewster. He took us from a bowl game to a 1-15 or only one win season. It's like two years in a row. And every year he'd switch up his coaching staff. And switching up your coaching staff drastically like this, I have to agree with you. That's a problem with the guy at the top. Now Charlie Strong has had good success at Louisville. He was, he used to work, under Florida under Urban Meyer, and that's how he got his name out there. But if you're making the changes, especially after one game into the season like this, that tells me that you've lost confidence in what you want to do as a coach. Because a head coach, his job is to coach the coaches. And he coaches the coaches. He tells the head coach, he goes to his offensive coordinator. He says, "This is kind of what I want to do. These are where I want to go. This is what we need to focus on." Then he tells, it does the same with defense coordinator, the special teams coordinator. A good head coach manages his assistant coaches. Yeah. And so if he's making changes, that means he's either lost his own way. Yeah, in what he wants to do, and blaming others.
Right, yep. Blaming others. So he's clearly not worth $5 million a year to Texas. They made a mistake. All right. Returning to the subject that is dominating international news, but not in the United States. The United States, what the top news story is? Has nothing to do with the tidal wave of Muslims.
Is it the Patriot story?
No, not the Patriot story. No, it's there's some religious clerk in Kentucky that was sent to jail because she refused to do her job and grant gay couples a marriage license. So the Republican candidates are swooning all over her, trying to get their picture taken with this religious dimwit. And that's the top story in America.
I don't know what else I expected. Stupidity at its prime.
Okay. The top story in the world is this flood of Muslims into Europe, and Europe saying that quotas need to be imposed and that the United States needs to participate in those quotas. Here's more on these stories, because This is fundamentally changing the world as we know it. At least 850,000 people. At least 850,000. I mean, we're up there very close to a million. That's the number that I told you we were going to deal with this year. At least 850,000 people are expected to cross the Mediterranean seeking refuge in Europe this year and next. That's just the number crossing the Mediterranean. That's not the number marching from Syria through Turkey into Greece and walking up through Hungary. No. This is just the number that are going to come into Europe via boat. And the other number, the ones from Syria that are not coming in by boat, is actually greater. So we're dealing with millions. This is not a tens of thousands problem. This is not a hundreds of thousands problem. This is a millions problem. And Europe this year, the United Nations said, giving estimates that are already looking conservative. Conservative means that there'll be 1 million by boat and there'll be 1 million by land this year alone. The UN Refugee Agency called for more cohesive asylum policies to deal with the growing numbers, as opposed to, no. If you want to deal with the growing numbers, reject them. That is the only rational choice that can be made to keep Europe from destroying itself. Many refugees are from Syria. They're driven back. They're driven to make the voyage by intensified fighting there and worsening conditions for refugees in surrounding countries due to funding shortfalls in aid programs. That's the problem. Yeah, the problem is that the world is not coughing up more of its money. Good grief. You ever heard of Saudi Arabia? What about Kuwait? You think that they have alligator hands, you know, little alligator arms? They're not long enough to reach into their pockets? No, the problem is Islam. Muslims are killing Muslims, and so Muslims are trying to flee Muslims killing Muslims. But why would you want then to have Muslims who will kill Muslims into your country? In 2015, the United Nations anticipates that 400,000 new arrivals will seek international protection in Europe via the Mediterranean Sea. So this 850,000 was a 12-month rolling number. The 450,000 just the rest of this year. My guess is that right now there are 450,000 either en route or that have actually already arrived. Germany alone has said they're taking in 800,000 this year and every year thereafter. So, and they want the rest of Europe, of the European Union, which is 20-some-odd nations, to all have quotas imposed so that the German number should be about 10% of the total number for Europe. So, I mean, it could be as many as, well, if the German number is 10%, it would be 8 million. But if the German number is 20%, it's 4 million. I mean, these are gargantuan numbers. And the very moment that there is an established program and a willingness to take them in, the numbers will grow exponentially. Spokesman William Sindler from the United Nations said that the prediction for this year was close to being fulfilled with 300 and this is so funny. I mean, people are just stupid. At the United Nations, they said that the number for 2015 could reach 450,000, and they said 366,000 have already made the voyage. So there's 366,000 that are already there, crossing the ocean. That's not counting how many are en route across the Mediterranean, and it doesn't count how many are making the trip by land. We're back to millions, folks. So far, the numbers do not appear to have slowed down, with many appearing spurred on by Germany's announcement that it will ease the rules for Syrians seeking refuge who first reached the European Union through other countries. That's exactly what I said. The very moment that Merkel went to verbal war against those who were more sane regarding the stupidity of doing this, and pronounced that not only was Germany going to accept 800,000 of them this year and every year thereafter, the moment that occurred, that it was over, that the tsunami of Muslims would fill Europe. And Islam was born out of racial hatred, born out of war, born as a criminal enterprise. And so Europe is importing a poison, a pathogen, more deadly than anything that man has conceived. This is the death of Europe. And, you know, it's not only the United States that falls over the next 10 to 15 years. It's also Europe. You're seeing right now how Europe falls. A single-day record of 7,000 Syrian refugees arrived in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia on Monday, while 30,000 are on Greek islands, most of them on Lesbos. Imagine, Macedonia, you know, is the size of 3 or 4 postage stamps. Tiny little impoverished country. And here in Macedonia, a landlocked country, you've got 7,000 that arrived in little Macedonia in one day. 30,000 more are spotted all around the Greek islands. Many arrive first in Greece and leave the EU to travel up through the Balkans and to Hungary and on to Germany. So obviously the discussions this week in Europe are taking on even greater urgency, because it obviously cannot be a German solution to a European problem. It's not a European, it is now a European problem. It wasn't a European problem until Merkel in Germany agreed not only to take them in, but to demand that all other European countries also take them in. This says that other countries, including the United States and wealthy Gulf states and Japan, must face their responsibilities, according to the United Nations. So the United States will be pressured to take in 1 million of them. Germany takes in 800,000. The United States will be pressured to take in 1 million of them, fundamentally changing the culture of the country, bringing the very terrorist in that the nation went over there to fight, to keep out. It is amongst the dumbest, most counterproductive things politicians have ever done in their long history of doing dumb and counterproductive things. The White House said that it was considering steps to ease the crisis. A crisis the United States created in the first place. Yes, the White House said everyone is well aware of the sense of urgency. It's a knee-jerk reaction. Yes, the Muslims are coming. We must let the Muslims in. Yes, everyone is aware of the sense of urgency. When you do the wrong thing, you make a problem worse. The United States was attacked by Muslims, suicide bombers, on 9/11. We did the wrong thing. Immediately thereafter, we invaded Afghanistan. We made things worse in Afghanistan, worse for everyone. We accomplished nothing worthwhile. We sacrificed blood and coin because we did the wrong thing. Shortly thereafter, we invaded Iraq on a pile of lies. Once again, the United States was desirous of the sense of urgency to respond. We did the wrong thing. We just did the wrong thing. It almost doesn't matter if you look throughout our history. We almost always do the wrong thing out of a sense of urgency. The Germans, out of a sense of urgency, did the wrong thing. And now all of Europe is paying for it. You know, the Germans started the last two world wars. World War I, World War II. Germany has now fired the first round in World War III, fundamentally changing Europe so that it will align with the Muslims against Israel, which is this point at which the next world war will pivot.
Talk about being good at something horrible. Three
in a row. Yeah, 3 for 3. Yahowah, Germany. And you look at this, too, and you realize something had to fundamentally change in Europe for Europe to universally demand that the only sane, the only moral, the only civil, the only non-terrorist country in the whole of northeastern, western Africa, and throughout the Middle East, Israel, to turn on Israel and to make Israel pay, to sanction Israel, to boycott Israel, to put Israel in a situation that it either capitulates and gives the West Bank to Muslims, just as Neville Chamberlain gave Czechoslovakia to Adolf Hitler, or they will starve. That's the position they're going to be put in, and it was hard to understand how the world could be that stupid until this influx of the most anti-Semitic poison the world has ever known. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott bowed to pressure from critics on Wednesday and said that Australia would accept 12,000. Well, I guess there's one place I don't want to go, Australia. I'll scratch that off of my list of countries that I would consider sane. And that's on top of its current humanitarian intake quota of 13,750. 25,000, or actually 26,000. And then Abbott also said that we will intensify our airstrikes against the Islamic State. Why not make it, rather than 26,000, why not make it 100,000? Yeah, just continue the airstrikes. Because they're what's causing this. Germany's decision last month to open its doors to Syrians who arrived elsewhere in the EU has brought this issue sharply into focus, as did images last week of a drowned Syrian toddler washed up on a Turkish beach, which appeared on the newspaper front pages around the continent. Remember, Scott, I said that was the dad's fault? Well, I'm here to tell you that we now know about that whole story. They weren't refugees at all. They weren't living in the war-torn conflict area of Syria. No, for 3 years they had been living in Turkey. For 3 years they've been living in Turkey. There was no threat to them. They were not persecuted. There was absolutely no threat to them. They are not refugees. They were not threatened in any way. They were living in Turkey and had been living in Turkey for 3 years. The dad wanted to make the trip because he wanted better dental care for himself than he could achieve in Turkey. His son died because of his vanity with his own teeth. Those are the facts. You want to look at that picture and grieve? Then condemn the father. Condemn a Muslim father who did that to his son so that he might have a pretty smile. Oh, he'll woo the added women that he could add to his harem that way. And here's the whole world reacting and saying, oh, we've got to be compassionate. It's such a shame that this boy died. He died because his father was a nincompoop. Was not a refugee. They became Muslims and Sikhs in search of free dental care, of a handout. That's what they became. And because Merkel and Germany had decided that, oh, you can come in and be part of the German society You get all sorts of free dental care here, free health care, free housing, free food. Come on in. That's why he left Turkey. Did this article from the Washington Post mention that? Of course not. Does the Washington Post know it? Absolutely. Yesterday on the way home, I was listening to one of the more famous talk radio hosts, and he's having a political conversation with a political pundit, and talking about how that will be the most important image of the year, and then how that one image fundamentally will change the world, and yet neither of these idiots mentioned the fact that they weren't seeking asylum from a war-torn country. They weren't fleeing for fear of their life. This wasn't about freedom and opportunity and hope. It was about prettier teeth. You know, you ought to be careful before you base something on an image. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said on Tuesday that Europe must implement a joint system for dealing with asylum seekers, and yet this family was not an asylum seeker, and agreed to binding quotas on how to distribute refugees across the country. You no longer have free will. It's no longer your country. Germany. No, Germany is the dictator of the world. That's what Adolf Hitler sought to achieve. This joint European asylum system cannot exist only on paper, but must exist in practice. I say this because it lays out our minimum standards for accommodating refugees and the task of registering refugees, she told a joint news conference. Our responsibility is deeply moral. Yeah, right. It's moral to destroy your own home. It's moral to poison your family. It's moral to import the very terror that you have devoted your country military to fight. Moral. It's a complete lack of morality. It is a human responsibility, she said. It is a human responsibility to exercise good judgment, something that does not happen with politicians. We have to do this together. There are 28 countries in the EU with the same responsibility. She's there to dictate upon the others. You can have no morals if your choices don't exist. If you have no choice, if you have no free will, if you have to do what you're ordered to do, there is no morality. She is trying to dictate morality. It cannot be done. God himself can't dictate morality. You have to have free will to be moral. You have to exercise good judgment to be moral. You have to be informed and thoughtful to be moral. When someone is dictating what you must do, as Germany is doing, there is no morality. This from the same troubled area, the same poisoned well. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah, has said Tehran will no longer negotiate with the United States on any issue now that the nuclear deal has been approved. The comments appeared to contradict the more moderate President Rouhani. You know, it's stunning that the Western journalists still view Rouhani as moderate. Well, we've gone through this before, but it was Rouhani that was at the side of the Ayatollah Khomeini when he was in France. It was Rouhani that was the lead among Iranian Muslims and creating the opportunity for the Ayatollah to return and turn Iran into an Islamic republic. During the Great War between Saddam Hussein's Iraq and the Ayatollah's Iran, it was Rouhani that was in charge of the military response. He has written scores of books on Islam, particularly the influence of Shia Islam. He's a theologian. Anyway, the ignorant called him moderate, who said on Tuesday the Islamic Republic was ready to hold talks with the United States to resolve Syria's civil war. No, the Ayatollah says, no, that ain't going to happen. Why? Because the Iranian civil war, the Syrian civil war, just the Iraqi-Syria civil war, which is also a civil war being fought right now in Yemen, that civil war is life and death. It is a fight to the death. It cannot be resolved. It will never be resolved. It is a fight to the death. This is the battle that Yahowah predicted would ultimately end in the fall of Damascus, the narrowing of Israel at the waist, and a flood of Muslims. Just as they're flooding into Europe, they will flood into Israel. The Ayatollah said, we negotiated with the U.S. on the nuclear issue for specific reasons. His specific reasons were finally stated at the end of his press conference, the destruction of Israel. He said the Americans behaved well during the talks. In other words, we played them for the fools that the Abominator and his team really are. They behaved well, said the most poisonous implement of Islam in the world. We negotiated with the United States on the nuclear issue for specific reasons. The Americans behaved well in the talks, but we didn't, and we won't allow negotiations with the Americans on any other issue, the Ayatollah Khamenei said.
So basically they're saying that we were kids.
We were
basically kids.
Yeah, we behaved well.
Yeah. Your kids were really well behaved.
Yeah, you did.
Very nice.
You did. You capitulated exactly the way we wanted. As a matter of fact, if you really think about it, the reason that this deal finally went down, where the Iranians essentially gave up nothing, but they did say that with 24 days advance notice, that inspections might be approved into certain sites with 24 days notice. And that they would chemically transfer some of their uranium-235 of nuclear fissile strength into a different chemical form, which of course is very easily reverted back to the nuclear bomb material, and that we would exchange some old centrifuges for some new ones. The reason that they agreed to all of that, for the lifting of the sanctions, of course, is that, first and foremost, the United States promised that they would capitulate on Israel. That was the backroom conversation. That's why Kerry was so aggressive prior to the beginning of these talks, discussing the fact that Israel must relinquish the West Bank, must relinquish Jerusalem, must go back to the undefensible, narrowed at the waist lines of 1967, and must do so, otherwise they will receive boycotts and sanctions and be the pariah of all of Europe and the United States. And he went all around Europe garnering support for that position. And then he negotiates this deal. There's radio silence on it. He capitulated and gave the Iranians Israel. And so that's what he means by they behaved well during the talks. We gave the Iranians what they wanted the most. The other issue, of course, for Iran is it's in a fight for its very survival. Shia Islam, representing 15% of Muslims worldwide, are now in a fight for their very survival against Sunni Islam. And the United States continues to bomb the Sunni militants that are fighting against Shia Islam and are continuing to provide a mighty military for Shia Islam in Iraq. We behaved well. Yeah, in other words, the Abominator gave the Iranians exactly what they wanted. The Americans are not hiding, however, their animosity towards us. Now, The administration, it behaved well, but the Americans in general, they're not hiding their animosity towards Iran. Americans in Congress are plotting and passing bills against us. Negotiations are a tool for them to influence Iran and to impose their will, the Ayatollah Khamenei said. President Barack Obama on Tuesday secured 42 votes in the U.S. Senate to secure the nuclear deal, of which Republicans and pro-Israeli lobbies disapprove. Yep, he behaved well, and so did members of the Democratic Party. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has been a ferocious opponent of the Iran deal, citing it as a threat to the country's very existence. Here's Khamenei's parting comment. Allah willing, there'll be nothing left of the Zionist regime in 25 years, the Ayatollah Khamenei said. Meanwhile, the heroic jihadi Islamic spirit will not leave the Zionists in peace for a second. It served our interest. Allah willing, there'll be nothing left of the Zionist regime in 25 years, the Ayatollah Khamenei said. Meanwhile, our heroic jihadi Islamic spirit, our heroic Islamic terrorists will not leave the Zionists in peace for a second. You're one of those scumbag Democrats who is going to vote in favor of this deal. Chew on those words. And then deal with the wrath of Almighty God as a result of what you've done.